thanks everybody for joining. I really appreciate it, especially our panelists for dialing in. And I know you guys are all over the world, so thanks again for joining. I'll just do some quick introductions, and then I'm going to turn it over to Amy to kind of ask the first question and get this conversation started. So I'll start with ladies first. Denise DiPiano. She's an HR leader, practitioner, and catalyst with 20 plus years experience in corporate HR. Denise leverages her corporate experience to assist organizations in reshaping their approach from a traditional HR mindset to one that embraces today's business needs to become and remain agile. Thanks for joining, Denise.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks for MicroStrategy and Sai out here and your sponsors. I know that this was a huge undertaking for this event, and I'm thrilled to be invited and participating in an event that's really tackling some of the really topics that are at the forefront of businesses today, especially during these unprecedented times. So I'm really looking forward to not only participating, but also listening to the other panelists afterwards. And I'm sure I'll learn a tremendous amount today myself. So thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Next, our friend Barry O'Reilly. Barry's an enterprise architect, coach, mentor, teacher, and founder of Black Tulip Technology. He spent a long career in the software industry where he was actually a chief architect for Microsoft. So Barry, thank you for joining. Appreciate it.
No problem, Mike. Looking forward to it.
Same here. Thank you. And then also we have Bob Claybrook, technology executive with over 30 years experience on the business side of technology. So Bob, thank you for joining.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I know I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Jaspreet Bindra. He's a thought leader, speaker, advisor, and teacher. He's also the co-founder of Uncube. So we're going to jump right into this. Thank you for joining, Jaspreet.
Thank you very much. I usually travel to where you are 2 or 3 times a year, but I guess this is the only way I'm going to be there this year. So good to be there. Thanks.
All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to my friend Amy, and she can introduce herself and kick it off. So thank you.
Great, thanks, Mike. So I'm Amy Wilder. I work for MicroStrategies. I'm a solution architect, and I've been in the business for more years than I probably like to admit. I just wanted to kind of kick it off today, and understanding that there's going to be a lot of discussion today about resiliency, agility, uncertainty, and a bunch of things that we really need to look at today in this time of COVID-19. But to start it off, I wanted to see if we could talk about, for those who aren't familiar with the themes, can we just kind of understand and briefly, in your words, what they mean to you in the world today for these types of resiliency and agility, and how the world can, come out of this better. So maybe, Jaspreet, you want to start us off today?
Sure. So first of all, thank you very much, and I hope everyone, wherever he or she is in the world, is safe, because we're in a situation which probably and hopefully we only see once in a generation. Having said that, I think while many of us are calling what has happened today the COVID pandemic and the result therefore as a black swan, in many ways it wasn't a black swan. It was something which was always predicted. While there was always while it has obviously created a lot of disruption, a black swan is something which is usually both disruptive as well as unpredictable. But this was always. Sorry, you want to say something, Amy?
No, I'm listening.
Okay, good. Yeah, so it was always predicted, and so while this event has happened, I think I don't think that this is going to be the first one. This is probably the first of many, and so a couple of things here. One is that the real disruption, my view, or the real black swan or near black swan, has not been COVID as much as the lockdowns that have happened because of COVID. That was the part which was unpredictable. That everything suddenly the world will absolutely shut down. And so the irony here is that while the world has slowed down, change has accelerated. And it's with this irony and sometimes which we cannot understand that we are living today. Now, it is in many ways, in any part of the world, certainly in my part of the world, which is an emerging economy, it is certainly a bit of a Darwinian moment as far as societies and companies go. This is one of those events of which only a few companies would emerge unscathed, and it will be fun to explore as we go forward that which of these companies are will realize that they were fragile, which of these companies were resilient so that they stay there, and then which of these companies actually turn out to be anti-fragile, so actually gain from this crisis. The final thing I would like to say, just as a upfront, and it will be a bit of a theme as we go forward from what I would be speaking, is that while we are furiously searching for a vaccine for COVID, there is probably a way that we should look at COVID itself as a vaccine. What happens in a vaccine? A vaccine is basically an instrument which just inserts some weakened viruses or bacteria into your body, and then your body kind of figures it out, produces some antibodies, and because those are weakened viruses, the antibodies kill them. And then when next time something like this happens, the antibodies are ready. So if we think of, for our companies, for our life, for our society, COVID itself as a vaccine, and start making those antibodies now, it's when the next big one comes, say global warming, we'll be far more ready than what we were before COVID came. And that's, in a sense, a positive spin, a positive way to look at this in itself as a vaccine. And so there are these 3 or 4 different thoughts that I want to just say right up front, and I'll kind of talk more about them as we go forward later.
Okay,
yeah, that is
great.
really well said. I've seen a lot of differences in the way businesses do and behave now, and I think going forward, when the next one does, some of these things and lessons we've learned, we can really use going forward not if, but when this happens again. Barry, what any thoughts on what has been discussed so far?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that Jaspreet mentions the vaccine and how we should be thinking about how that can condition us and shape us and make us more ready for the next thing that's going to come. So as part of my research and part of what I teach to software architects, I teach the idea that the first requirement for any system that we build should be to survive an onslaught of fire-breathing lizards that destroy the city that your business is based on. And that seems ridiculous because people tend to ignore that kind of risk because the probability for fire-breathing lizards emerging from the sea is considered practically zero. But from that perspective, if you protect your system from those fire-breathing lizards, you're protected from fire, you're protected from war, you're protected from social unrest, and you're protected from pandemics. And so any of the architects who listened to me and built their systems like that will probably have software systems that aren't experiencing the kind of fragility that a lot of software systems are right now and during this pandemic.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Now we talked a lot about the organization and companies and those things, but from Denise, from your perspective, is there, from the people perspective too, how are those things changing and evolving in this time of COVID to also be resilient?
Yes. So from my perspective, I think that I know that we say it's technology led, but from my perspective, it's really human. It's led by humans and it's technology supported and enabled. I think that during this time, there's been a human transformation as much as a business transformation. And, the part of that is really people having the courage to really confront things that they were afraid of before, and they have to. They don't really have a choice. Well, I guess they do have a choice. Their choice would be to not be successful in business and ultimately close, but they really have to confront what's in front of them today. So I think that human nature side of it is really powerful and really important. You can put an app on someone's phone to enable them to clock in and out somewhere virtually. But if that app is so complex and so that someone can't use it, it's really defeating the purpose. So from my perspective, it really is much more of a human transformation and changing things, and that really, and I hope we can have time to get into really what that means in terms of talent and the skills gap, as well as the culture of that organization, in order to allow people to be experimental and not be so perfect all the time.
Okay,
Excellent.
great.
Denise,
How about yourself,
I
Bob?
understand what you're saying. When technology it exists today, it's throughout. It needs to be applied correctly. Just my thoughts. Just going back to something Jaspreet said on not the last. It's definitely not the last, and I like the word on escalating it as we continue to grow. And you mentioned global warming as an onset, as it continues to be a challenge. And then I think the one interesting thing for me is the world. Another thing you said, world has slowed as innovation continues to occur. I think we're in a good place from a technology perspective, and I think to Barry's point, I don't know that we can. I think just based on the distributed computing models that we use today from the cloud technologies and such, I think we can take on some of the physical things that are coming out of the sea at us, the lizards, or as you said. But I guess my point is that technology is available today. It's how we apply it and how we continue to take the human factors into account. I mean, the reality is we can track us all. We have distributed compute capabilities to be able to support many different facets and solutions and such, but it's just we need to apply it correctly. And I think that COVID, from a positive perspective, I look at the rules of business of old, the strict rules that we had working from home and such. The fact we're all here today from around the world, I mean, look where we are today. I just feel like there's really nothing we can't take on from a technology perspective. But I think now we need to focus on the human side, and I think that's really what this event has helped us do. And as we're all connected today, I think that means a lot. And not that I'm looking forward to the next event by any means, but at least we have a means to an end to survive and thrive. So.
Yeah, we can either be victims of an event or we can thrive through the event. When I work with some of my clients, we talk about having this, toxic environment and having to kind of cleanse it and it's that immune system, just like Jaspreet was talking about. It's cleansing that environment. So I think that, and taking a really holistic approach to the environment and to what's happening within that organization is important.
Very good.
I think Denise, you make a good point about the fact that we need to focus on the human side of these things, because if we're going to deal with complex and unpredictable problems, then we need those human skills of resiliency. Does not come from machines. It doesn't come from magical AI fairy dust. It comes from our ability to adapt and our ability to change the way not only the way we act, but the way we look and see and interpret the world around us. And I think as we move into the second and third order impacts of COVID-19, which no one is really looking at the minute, but in six months down the line, we're going to have fractured supply chains. We're going to have businesses in various stages of financial distress. We're going to have employees who have been out of work for several months. We're going to have new surges of energy while energy dips in other parts of the economy and in our society. And all of these human things are going to test the software that we have in place that we're dependent on. And what we're going to find out is what we already knew in 1968, that software is not elastic, it's not resilient, it's incredibly brittle. And it's the humans around software that give it any of its capacity to help us.
Yeah, in fact, both of you, Denise and Barry, make some interesting points, which, and it's something which I've been kind of working on a lot now, which is, again, coming back from the theme of how, though it has slowed down the world, it has accelerated change. And I think one of the changes that it has accelerated, in my opinion, quite a lot, is that it has greatly accelerated the so-called future of work. Okay, and so, because, the future of work was always going to happen, but it was like a little way out into the future. Okay, and so, it was going to happen in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20. But then suddenly in 2 weeks, the future or large parts of it have actually become now. For the most obvious one, obviously, is decentralized work. and which is now being defined as work from home, but is soon going to be work from anywhere. And while Barry and his ilk and some of the other tech companies, etc., took that as a given, as a granted, it wasn't so for the rest of the industry or rest of the world. And I think now suddenly everyone is kind of looking at decentralized world. And as Barry says, it's not going to end when the lockdowns end, in that sense. I mean, they say that habits change between 22 or 66 days, depending on where you are and what kind of person you are. And look, this is habit changing because we've been locked down for those number of days. Even the concept of, decentralized work, for example, all the tools, Denise, and, I've worked in large organizations too. And in fact, Barry, I was with Microsoft for a few years. And for most of us, collaboration was about how people would meet each other and talk to each other, etc. But now you have to collaborate using technology because there's no other way, for a period of time, and that's also changed. The fact that people are not going to expect long-term or lifelong jobs, and employers are not going to expect people to stay there for life, and therefore lifelong learning, and so I think a bunch of things have suddenly kind of come to us, and work is just one thing. I mean, lots of other stuff, supply chain, etc., etc. But since you were talking people, I think there's this unbelievable, monumental shift in work which is going to happen, which has already started, and that will pose a threat to many people. But I think it's also a massive opportunity for a lot of companies and entrepreneurs to leverage on. So I'm pretty. It's one of the few things I'm excited by these days. So.
Jaspreet, that's great.
So it's centralized. I'm sorry, Mike. I just want to follow up there. So you bring up two great. Barry brought up one. You brought up the other. The centralized work environment. I look at that as friction, right? So we've had these rules in place for so long. It's the friction, and then how do we utilize the technology to evolve past it? So I think with COVID, again, one of the positives is, and everything you just talked about, connectivity and work and how we operate, significant strides, and we've shown we can do it. At the end of the day, we always talked about work from home, and we're there. I think the other thing, to Barry's point on the unemployment rate, I think Barry brought that up. The next phase is how do we help create new opportunities to work, right? Meaning roles that we haven't even defined yet. What is the technology going to bring us? So again, it's more friction, right? So one thing causes the friction of the past, the centralized work environments. We've solved that. Unfortunately, the technology, you could say, has created some of the unemployment. So how do we use the technology to evolve and create new opportunities for folks and new efforts? I guess there's definitely opportunities out there for us always to figure out how to utilize the technology to evolve and again, relieve the friction that's been created. So.
Yeah, Bob, I think you bring up a good point that the roles that we know today in business are going to be changing. Not only the role itself, but certainly the skill set that someone is going to bring is going to change. What you're looking for in a leader I think, is going to be different. I think the word leader is being redefined. People that are not in leadership roles are really stepping up and adapting.
Absolutely.
And people that are in leadership roles are not adapting. So I think that that's going to be very different. I think that the way that we look at work is going to be different in terms of, why are we doing something? How are we doing it? As opposed to just, well, this is the way I've always done it, and this is what we're doing. I think
Right.
as a person, you have to evolve, right? You want to be able to learn, you want to be able to be curious, or you should be curious, hopefully, intellectually curious to understand what is happening. And I think the future of work, or future proofing, is just one of that. That's a subset of that. Really being able to understand how you are going to continue to be relevant and upskill or reskill. And I think that goes back to what I was talking about from a talent perspective, of really looking at what your workforce is and understanding where those skill gaps are. And, how do you then help that person to obtain those skills, or ultimately look for other talent.
And I mean, oh, go ahead, Barry. Sorry.
Yeah, so I noticed yesterday a company that I'm quite familiar with, very, very large company, announced a lot of layoffs yesterday, and then they started flashing up in my LinkedIn feed. People were looking for new jobs, and 90% of those people who were updating their employment status had the title project manager. And it's interesting to see that we're now moving away from a role that was very much defined by the ability to plan and predict and control the work that we do, is suddenly having a diminishing place in our working lives, which I think is very interesting.
That's a great point, Barry. We can't know what we don't know, what will come, right? But how do we better prepare to handle that? And as humans, and we're curious by nature, and how do we handle the friction and stress and come out of it and balance the need to plan, the need to have stability, but the need to know that we don't know everything, right? And as a person, but also as organizations, right? So
at some level, innovation is never planned, right? It's normally an accident. So, sticking with that theme, Barry, just to add to it.
Yeah, but that what you bring out. Sorry, I interrupted you. Please continue.
Go ahead.
No. You said something very interesting, that innovation is never planned. It kind of comes by accident, and somewhere I believe that that's going to be a problem with all of this online work from home stuff. Okay, because I think those innovation many times would come from the environment that we were in with other human beings in one place, talking to each other, informal stuff happening, water cooler conversation, whatever you call it, and that's kind of gone away. Now it's very structured, literally, meeting to meeting to meeting. You never pack up and go home. You don't have time to unwind, because it's suddenly become the same. You're working from home, in fact, is a lot more stressful than working from office. I foresee a WFO happening in some time. Okay, saying that, look, you know what, today I'm WFO, so don't disturb me. I'm working from office. Okay, which is kind of which will be different. But I think innovation, creativity, and I know a lot of people are trying to build technology to simulate that environment as best as possible. I think at the end of it, we will need to have some kind of a hybrid where we learn from now, and a lot of work actually continues to happen remotely and from anywhere. But it will be absolutely necessary to actually be in one place at certain times also, so that human innovation, creativity, that connect doesn't go away.
Yeah, but your point on the collaboration, the next evolution. So we're here where we are. How do we evolve the technology to get back to that? Because it may be what we need, right? So as we're this far, and I understand what you're saying about the accidental conversations in the office and things like that in that central work environment. Again, changing work hours and things. I don't think that collaboration inside an office is going to go away, but whatever that is, from a technology perspective, what can we do to evolve it? As we're all on Teams or Slack today collaborating, how do we continue to evolve those solutions and experiment to bring the real collaboration back? I think that's again, we've come a long ways over the past few months, but there's more to be learned, more to be gained, and I think it frankly just brings the world closer. I mean, where you're sitting today and where I am, think about how many conference calls we've been on over our careers. I much more enjoy this, just sitting here having a real chat. And how do we take it to the next level? That's really the question from a technology perspective, and what is it going to take? So 3D modeling, I don't know. I think maybe a 3D marker board or something like that is what I need. But
yeah, exactly.
Barry, I'm sorry. I think I cut Barry off, but
no.
Nope. So Bob, you bring up a good point. You guys were all talking about the future of work from home, kind of where we go from here. What do you guys feel is the number one challenge going forward? And I'd love to hear from all four of you, but maybe Bob, you can start. But the number one challenge you see going forward based on what you're hearing today.
I think we've all made a significant amount of progress where we are, and like I said before, I think it's a step in the right direction, but we're going to have to evolve it. And again, I look at it as an opportunity, not have to be in the same place to get that level of collaboration that we once had. But I'm not sure where technology. I think I have ideas where technology needs to go. we're not there yet. So I think, as I said before, I think just evolving the technology platforms and the collaboration platforms. I mean, we've talked about where we are today for many, many years. We never really got there. It took something like COVID to get us there, to be quite honest with you. And I'm not talking about the folks that do it on a regular basis. I know there are people that use the collaboration technology on a regular basis, and they use it effectively. I'm talking about the masses, right? Large corporate organizations and things like that, and really getting together, running your stand-ups and having your consistent communication and things like that. So how do we get to that, that virtual marker board that we're all comfortable with? And again, I know marker boards exist, in teams and things like that, but we've got to get ourselves comfortable with it. And what does that look like, another 6 months out? Or quite frankly, as Jaspreet said earlier, when this comes again, and my concerns in the fall and things like that. So that's really where I'm at. How do we continue to evolve it? I really think there's a human side of it at the end of the day. So we haven't exhausted the technology that we have today, yet at the same time we need to continue to evolve it. So
How about you, Barry? What do you think the #1 challenge is going forward?
I think the #1 challenge we have today and the #1 challenge going forward is going to be the same thing. It's uncertainty. You can see the shock waves going through our society, the way that we discuss how do we cope with this pandemic. What do we do? What's the right course of action? There is no right course of action. There's no scientifically proven right way to get us from A to B in this situation. But everyone, with and without scientific training, has very, very strong opinions about what we should do next and how we should do it. And as we start to experience the second and third order effects of this pandemic, the way they hit our businesses, our supply chains, our relationships to each other, and especially the way that software works when it doesn't work, as those things start to hit, it's going to create even more uncertainty. And managing that uncertainty, whenever we realize that you're now a globally distributed company, even if you once had an office in a particular city, everyone is now a globally distributed company. Competition for talent changes, everything changes. Your software that you have, all those applications that run on a server room somewhere in your office building, aren't going to hold up. And migrating that software, getting that software to work and support us is going to be really, really tough. And I think a year from now, people are going to look at us, they're going to look at Silicon Valley, and they're going to say, you sold us a bucket of lies, you sold us a technology utopia that never existed. You sold us a technology utopia that NATO said in 1968 was actually a crisis. And you put some lipstick on that pig, and you've been charging us top dollar for it ever since. And I think we're going to be in trouble as a technology industry when people realize that we've duped them. I saw a fantastic video flew past me on LinkedIn yesterday where someone said that their 6-year-old asked why AI hadn't solved the COVID-19 pandemic yet. That's the kind of expectation we built up in the mind of a 6-year-old. And we need to get back to solving problems with technology rather than marketing technology, I believe.
absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love the fact you call out the global. We've all become global companies as a result. That's perfect. I mean, that's really a great point. Sorry,
I'm just curious, any thoughts on #1 challenge ahead, or anything that Bob or Barry had mentioned?
Yeah. So with your permission, I'll actually talk about two, and one is in my mind more practical, and the other is a little bit philosophical, if it may. And look, the practical one, think of it of where I'm coming from, the country I'm living in. All of us have moved very fast to this way of working. But it goes beyond working, right? Schools have moved to this way of teaching. Hospitals and medical establishments have moved to semi-healing this way. Now, it's all very good. But then if you kind of look at emerging economies, poorer countries, more than half the populations do not have this. So there's no way for them to learn. There's no way for them to get treated. There's no way for them to work. I mean, connectivity, PCs, smartphones, what we take for granted. And so I think this digital divide, which was always spoken about, is going to become even much more pronounced now and much more stark now. And it's going to literally kind of separate the two, people who have access and people who do not have access, because stuff could have been done offline without the digital tools, but now it cannot be. And so, for the sake of argument, children of poorer families cannot learn anymore. There's no way for them. So I think that's a very, very big, massive challenge practically, and it's going to be tough. Philosophically, I think we have unlearned very fast. We've kind of super fast. We've unlearned stuff, and we are kind of here. And then when this crisis passes away, I hope we learn also from the crisis super fast, because as human beings, I have very less faith in our race, frankly, that we will. I believe that we are just going to go back to spoiling everything like the way we were, and we're not going to learn from this. And we'll say that, look, it's as unpredictable as the fire-spewing lizards of Barry's life. Okay, it's not going to happen again. It happened once, it's never going to happen again. Okay, but you know what, it'll happen again. So we want to learn is the other big challenge.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I agree. I think that the challenge that I'm seeing and hearing about is really about how do we continue what has already happened, the small steps that companies are taking now to be resilient and to be anti-fragile and to continue. And I just read something in the Society for Human Resources that 64% of employers are saying they will not allow their employees to work from home once the pandemic is done. I'm speechless now.
That's ridiculous.
I'm speechless now. I just don't understand how that can even be on their minds in order to be competitive and to be resilient. Like, it just confounds me.
I guess one thing, Denise, from a sorry to interrupt, from a technology perspective, I think one thing that's available and just pure technology, because I know there I hate to say old school folks out there, leaders out there, but the technology exists to understand what we're doing every day, right? If you want to look at it and see how active we are online, we have all that capability, the analytics around it, the significant amount of data. I mean, let's face it, we can track every step of our day if we want to look at it, right? If we think that's valuable. And I think there are some leaders out there that feel it is valuable, and I'm not saying not to expose it. We could expose it to make them feel comfortable. Then they can find out how productive folks are. But the technology exists to do that today. That's pretty straightforward. You can even throw IoT devices out there if you prefer.
Think that is the example to or the time that you say, oh, it didn't work, because you have maybe lots of kids at home, or you don't have the broadband to work, or your parents live with you. So this is not the example to say, oh, it didn't really work, or productivity wasn't as high as I had anticipated it to be. I think companies, again, being more resilient and anti-fragile, you have to say, you know what, we're going to give up a little bit of the productivity in order to continue to work, in order to, continue our supply chain. So if I have to, a little bit of those inefficiencies, that's fine. I'm going to continue to be successful and continue to, achieve my outputs. So for me, I'm concerned from that perspective, that people, in everything, you take when it happened to 9/11 here, we're always very good at adapting at that particular moment in that crisis. We get through it, we plow through it. But we don't take then a step back and kind of do that retrospective and learn from it and grow and evolve from it.
Right.
And something just as simple as humanity. I'm sorry, let me just finish one more. The humanity around, the common courtesies and the kindness. I hope that also doesn't dissipate, which generally happens after a crisis. I'm sorry, let me go.
Oh, that's a great point. I saw both Jaspreet and Barry shaking their heads. You guys have additional to add on to that, or?
No, it was. Sorry, Barry. Please go first.
No, go ahead, Jaspreet. You started first.
Look, it was interesting to hear Denise, about that 64% statistic that you threw me also, very frankly, because it's weird. But here, speaking about India, nearly every day, about half a dozen CEOs, large company CEOs, are coming out and talking about how they have literally seen the light, okay, and how going forward, they will work this into their policies that a bunch of people need to be working from anywhere. For example, one of the largest IT outsourcer in the world today is called TCS. They're about 450,000 employees. And that CEO has gone, it's about $100 billion market cap company. And the CEO has gone and said, you know what, 75% of my people will work from home going forward. And therefore 75%, I'm going to actually save 75% in real estate costs, besides some other efficiencies. And it's weird that you say, for example, in India, for example, sometimes there's an issue of women's safety, especially in, when there are night shifts in all these outsourcing companies or other companies, etc. And so this also, however trite it sounds, it also solves that problem for a bunch of such companies. And so there's this, I actually foresee that it might get worked into law of some kind because of safety reasons, because of pollution or environmental reasons, traffic reasons, because we've seen that, maybe work that in maybe, 2 days out of 5. And as you rightly said, Denise, I mean, if we need to be anti-fragile, we have to take that hit in productivity. Because when the next big one happens, guess what? 100% of your workforce is trained to work at home, is equipped to work at home, which was not the case so far, at least in India. It would scramble to do that, and now it's kind of there. And so, like in an hour, you're kind of shifting. And so that's how at least people here are looking at it. Some of the leaders.
Appreciate that.
Barry, did you have a comment, Barry?
Yes, no, I find it fascinating to see that the discussions around working from home always come back to issues of control. Because I've been in Scandinavia now for almost 20 years. And when I first moved here, one of the first things I had to learn at work was the principle of freedom with responsibility, where I'm moving from the UK, which is much more hierarchical and much more controlled, to a situation where my boss didn't care where I was or what, I could be in a different country, I could be hanging upside down from the ceiling doing my work. They didn't care as long as the work was done. And that's evolved over the last 20 years in Sweden, to the point where if you go for a job interview, you don't talk about working from home. It's taken for granted that we're going to work from home if we need to. When this pandemic started, there's a lot of fuss being made in the international press about Sweden not having a lockdown. And we locked ourselves down, and we didn't have to have a discussion about it. We didn't have to have laws. Everyone said, I'm working from home for the next 3 months. And everyone said, fair enough, that's what we'll do. And so I think that coming back to the idea of control, I always say, and I write in my pieces, that we're stuck in the factory. We're stuck with the methods and the ideas of the Industrial Revolution. We want to measure and monitor and control and come to the economy of scale, and we're constantly trying to repeat that pattern. And I think if anything, COVID-19 is the first alarm bell to ring to say that that era is over, and we're going to have to find another way to cope with the kind of complex problems that we have in front of us, because the old factory method of produce, refine, produce more, produce cheaper, produce faster, produce better, those days are gone. And we're going to see how brittle our supply chains are, how brittle our relationship to manufacturing and the good that's delivered into society actually is. And I think we're going to see a massive shift. So the people who feel the need to control and monitor and measure their people, they won't be in charge anymore. I think that's the future that we're going to. I'm optimistic that that's the future we're going towards.
That's really good.
I think, and you guys both brought it up, but I think, the services that we have in the homes and things like that, I think that there's always going to be an office space to come and work if you want to or if you need to, right? We've had some regional events in the Northeast where one of my comments were, if you're safe at home, stay at home. There's no need to be on the roads and get in the office, and this has been 10 years ago. So again, if you need to come to the office, come to the office, but it's more of a safe haven for you and where you're more comfortable. And I think, Jaspreet, I think you mentioned traffic. I have some real deep thoughts on traffic. Coming out of this, I would love to eliminate traffic. If we just focus on that one, that would be wonderful. Think of all the productivity we gain back by getting rid of traffic, so if I can reduce commute times by 20, 30, 40%, that would be impressive. And again, I think we have the technology to do it. I know I have the Waze app, so anyway.
Absolutely. So
it's
go ahead,
the
Amy.
pollution, right? That comes with the traffic. There's a whole other benefit
I just
Yeah,
wanted
exactly.
to touch on,
That's
I'm
good.
sorry, I just wanted to touch on something that Barry had said, which I think it kind of goes back to what culture a company has or an organization has. If the organization has a culture of trust versus fear, if they have an organization that is open and tolerates small successes, small failures, I think that lends a lot to the work from home kind of mentality as well. If you have to be in front, you can only be productive if you're in front of me kind of mentality. I think that goes back to the trust and what that culture of that organization is. And I would love to be able to work all the time from home, and the benefits of, I think just was had talked about the environment and how clean the waters are right now and how clean the air is right now. That's wonderful, but here you go again where the disruption is on that. So in the United States we have automobile insurance companies giving back refunds because you're not on the road. What's that doing to the gas stations? So there's a lot of other things that go along with that. Do you really need to have your car, serviced as much? And it just goes on. So, and down the line from that supply chain of all of those.
Great. So I had one more question, and then we're gonna close it out. But really, mostly for Jaspreet or Barry, as business owners, what are you seeing? What are your customers talking to you about? Not only from a business but from a technology perspective. And I know you could probably talk for more than 5 minutes, but I'm just curious, quickly what kind of what your customers or what you're seeing and what kind of questions you're getting asked.
Barry, please.
Well, yeah, well, my business is resiliency and anti-fragility in software. So I'm getting the kind of questions you'd expect right now. How do we survive this? What's going to break? How are we going to fix this? People are worried about what's coming. Not right now. People are just trying to survive. But the big worry for most of my customers is they're looking at their pipeline in Q3, Q4, and Q1, Q2, and they're thinking, what's in the pipeline? What's going to be different? How do I manage the uncertainty? I'm working with one customer organizing conferences, and we're having to look at the conference and say there's a huge amount of uncertainty about what a conference actually is in Q4 2020. Is it online? Is it in person? Is it a mixture of online, in person? And what are people going to expect in Q4? What will they have seen? What will have evolved in their perception of what a conference actually is? And that means that they're looking for reassurance, but they're also looking for something new, something novel. And so we're working with VR conferences in order to cover all the bases, just in case we can't move around in Q4 2020, which is very, very much a possibility. And so having that uncertainty addressed and having people around them with the skills and the ability to address uncertainty, which isn't a great deal of the workforce, to be honest. Uncertainty is very, very difficult. So that's what I'm seeing from my customers at the minute. We're very uncertain now. And we're plugging holes and we're dealing with it, but we're going to be very uncertain for a very long time. And what does that look
like? Mike, I'm a tiny one-person business, okay, I am distributed across 3 or 4 different businesses, so it's like 0.25 employees each in that sense. But the businesses are all around thought leadership. So they're around speaking, it's around consulting, advising, writing, a bunch of stuff. And what's happened is that, look, I think pretty much, it kind of hit everyone like on the head. It's been the first, I think when the lockdown happened, COVID happened, lockdown happened, I think the first couple of months, businesses were only reeling in shock. And I'm talking of my customers. Okay, so, large corporations, small companies, all just reeling in shock. Okay, they're just trying to figure out what the hell is happening. And so no one was taking any decision whatsoever. Also hoping that, a couple of months and things come back to business as usual, and then we'll continue whatever we were doing before this thing happened. I think now the time is the time when people are starting to figure out that, look, you know what, we'll have to adjust to this new normal, never normal, next abnormal, whatever you call it. Okay, and therefore, they're trying to figure out, okay, fine, so what does that mean? Okay, what does that mean in terms of costs, revenues, the things that we do? What does it mean in terms of conferences, as Barry said, a bunch of things. So I think from now and for the next 3-4 months, people are going to be in the adjustment phase. They're over the shock phase. They're going to be in the adjustment phase, and as they adjust, as an entrepreneur, I have to adjust with them. And so pretty much one is pivoting on a daily basis and creating, and I'm sometimes fond of saying that when, opportunity does not knock, you have to build a new door. So, building new doors as we go forward, which are far more in tune with this newer reality. And so shock, adjustment, and post that, I think we're never going to come back to this normal. I think a lot of my customers and myself have written off 2020. Okay, literally from a business viewpoint. Okay, I mean, it's just going to be survival for 2020 for a lot of us. And 2021, hopefully things, kind of take a different shape. And that's the harsh reality.
So I guess from my perspective on business, I agree with what Jaspreet just said. After the event hit, we were organized, we were talking on a regular basis. We started reaching out to our clients, and it was the shock, right? So we got past it. Now we're having the conversations, and just on the, or I guess in that initial shock, it was a resiliency of getting everyone connected, getting everyone collaborating from their company's perspective, and we scrambled to help folks. I mean, we were there, asking them if they're okay. We got a communications established for them, and now we're past that. Now we're learning to operate. And it's interesting, you go around to different sectors. I mean, the reality of it is, I know in the U.S., grocers are thriving, right? So there are companies that are doing a great deal of business. On that same token, there are several other clients who are figuring out all these new customer behaviors as their e-commerce traffic, triples in some cases, or at least doubles. So, I mean, figuring out those new shopping patterns and understand the data and things like that, that's really the next set of questions that are coming out. How do we look at the supply chains? And we've talked a lot about it, the impacts and things like that. How do we create the resiliency going forward? So I think that's where we are, trying to figure out what's next. But I will say that the planning is by week. It's not on a 6-month level or quarterly level like we used to do. You're definitely talking weeks. Long term is a month. But I do see business coming back. And there are sectors that are devastated right now. And I feel that as I know in the U.S. again, as long as retail starts to open up, and as an example, everyone's taking the learnings and from a resiliency perspective moving forward. The one thing that I would say, though, just overall, what I'm getting to now is asking people, continue to collaborate, work out the kinks. It's not the folks that are on this panel who do this regularly. It's everybody. Utilize the technology, learn to collaborate, take some responsibility, as Barry said earlier, going back and understanding you can work from home, you can do these things. So that's one perspective, and work on your personal resiliency as a professional, right? And then I think another thing is we should all take the time to think about what new opportunities we can create and information we can share, right? So you look at that unemployment rate, there is something for people to do. How do we communicate it, and how do we, again, utilize the technology to make those things happen, right? Because we've all learned a lot, and again, at a mass level, not the several that were collaborating previously. And then, so I think to Jaspreet's point earlier, is that the in-office collaboration, I don't think the corporate offices are going away, but let's look at the office hours, set core hours to eliminate things like traffic. And then at the same time, if we're not all in the office, let's take collaboration to another level. And that's on us as technologists to figure it out. So to take, start looking at 3D things, like I said earlier. So we'll come up with some new toys to play with, but that'll be the next evolution for the next time this hits. And we'll learn even more and become stronger. So that's all I have. Back to you, Mike. I'm sorry, Denise, excuse me.
No, that's
I
okay,
thought I was
Bob.
last, sorry. Go ahead, Denise.
No worries at all.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's really working with my clients. It's pretty much a lot of what everyone else had talked about, but because of my HR, we're really looking at how people are responding in that human dynamics, and really working with people to trying to upscale, upskill their what they need in order to survive and be successful, not only personally for that particular employee in the workforce, but just in terms of what the company is needing. And so really reevaluating the roles, what critical roles, what the critical role was, an essential role pre-virus is very different right now, and will probably be different, once the pandemic is completely over or gets to a different phase. So I think it's really just looking at what that skill set is, and really trying to understand and work with those individuals. I think it's also just really trying to be able to set boundaries, and as much as have that flexibility of being able to work from wherever it is that you want to work from, but then also being able to say, I need to disengage at a certain hour, because you could be working with people all over the world. So, I might be up at 12 o'clock tonight to talk to someone. That doesn't necessarily mean that I should have to be up at, 8 o'clock in the morning to continue my work day. So I think it's really just being a lot more flexible. And I think really companies have to, I think that there will be a pendulum once the economies open up and where the states open up, because I think people are so starved for human interaction that they will go into the office. But I think that will slowly go back, and there'll be a leveling out of that.
Panel one, I hate to jump in here and cut you guys off, but we are at 9:50 and we do need to transition into number 2. Thank you so much, Mike, Bob, Amy, Jaspreet, Denise, Barry. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for facilitating a wonderful conversation.